Physicists have confirmed that something can move faster than the speed of light without breaking any law of physics. The question is, what exactly moved? And why the universe allows it? The answer sits in a category most people never think about: darkness itself. Not matter, not energy, not information, but the absence of light can cross distances faster than light ever could. And that fact is not a loophole or a trick of language. It is a measured, repeatable phenomenon that forces a sharp line between what relativity actually forbids and what it quietly permits. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what moved, why it does not violate causality, and what this reveals about the hidden structure underneath motion itself. In the first 60 words, the title question was named, "What did physicists observe moving faster than light?" The answer will be given before the outro, and it will be direct. The core spark is this. If you point a laser at the moon and flick your wrist, the bright spot racing across the lunar surface will travel faster than light. That is not speculation. That is geometry scaled up to cosmic distance. The reason it works is that the spot is not one photon making a sideways journey. It is a sequence of different photons arriving at different locations in rapid succession. And because those locations are separated by hundreds of thousands of kilometers, even a tiny angular motion on Earth translates into superluminal sweep speed on the moon. The small real payoff before the body begins is this. The speed of any projected spot equals the angular speed of the source multiplied by the distance to the screen. At sufficient range, even a slow human wrist flick produces infinite apparent speed. The checkable sign is that no energy, no mass, and no signal actually travel along the path of the spot. Each photon obeys the speed limit. Only the pattern breaks it. The default story is simple. Einstein's theory of relativity sets the speed of light as the ultimate speed limit for anything real. Matter cannot reach it. Energy cannot exceed it. Information cannot outrun it. Causality depends on this boundary. If a signal could travel faster than light, it could arrive before it was sent, creating paradoxes that unravel cause and effect. For more than a century, this has been the bedrock of modern physics, tested in particle accelerators, satellites, and cosmic observations. Every experiment that tried to break the speed limit has confirmed it instead. So when someone claims that something moved faster than light, the immediate reaction is dismissal. It sounds like bad science, misunderstood headlines, or clickbait. But contradictions get dismissed for a subtler reason. Most people assume that if something appears to move, it must be a thing. A spot of light looks like an object. A shadow looks like a shape. The human brain treats patterns as if they were carriers, and that instinctive conflation makes the real explanation invisible until the categories are pulled apart. The first anchor contradiction is the lunar laser spot. If you shine a handheld laser pointer at the moon and rotate your wrist by just 1 degree per second, the bright dot on the lunar surface will sweep across the ground at roughly 6,000 kilometers per second. That is 20 times the speed of light. The measurement is not subtle. The distance to the moon is 384,000 kilometers. The angular speed is controlled by your hand. The sweep speed is the product of the two. The old model predicts that nothing real can move that fast. The result is that the spot does move that fast, and it does so without any exotic physics, any new particles, or any violation that would trouble a relativity textbook. The scientific contradiction is that the spot is not a thing. It is a location where photons happen to be hitting the surface at a given moment. Each photon travels from Earth to Moon at exactly the speed of light. None of them move sideways. The spot moves because different photons arrive at different places in sequence, and the sequence can be faster than light because no individual photon is trying to keep up. The micro reframe is this: motion is not always transport. Sometimes motion is just the progression of a pattern across space, and patterns are not bound by the same rules as the things that create them. The reinforcement line is that you cannot ride along with the spot, assign it a rest frame, or measure its proper time, because it has no physical continuity. It is a mathematical location, not a traveling object. The second loop is the cosmic scissors. Imagine a pair of scissors with blades stretching across light years of space. As you close them, the point where the two edges meet will slide toward the hinge. If the blades are long enough and you close them fast enough, that intersection point will move faster than light. This is not a thought experiment with a flaw. It is a geometric fact. The intersection point is not made of matter. It is the place where two independent edges happen to coincide at a given instant. The old model would say that rigid objects cannot exist at cosmic scale, because any push or twist must propagate through the material at the speed of sound, not instantly. The result is that the intersection point is not part of a rigid object. It is a projected location defined by two separate events: the position of blade A at time t and the position of blade B at time t. Those events are space-like separated, meaning no signal needs to pass between them for the intersection to be defined. The contradiction is that the point moves faster than light, but nothing physical is traveling along its path. The micro reframe is that geometry can create the appearance of motion without requiring any substance to move. The reinforcement is that if you tried to send a message by modulating the intersection point, the message would still be limited by how fast you could wiggle the blades. And that wiggle propagates at the speed of sound through the material, far slower than light. The third loop is the lighthouse beam. A pulsar is a rotating neutron star that sweeps a narrow beam of radiation across space like a lighthouse. If the beam happens to graze a distant cloud of gas, the bright spot where the beam hits the cloud will race across the cloud's surface. At a distance of 1 light year, even a slow rotation of 1 revolution per second will make the spot move at 6 trillion kilometers per second, more than 600,000 times the speed of light. This has been observed. The old model says nothing can outrun light. The result is that the spot does outrun light, repeatedly, in every pulsar system, where geometry and distance align. The contradiction is that the beam is not a single ray traveling sideways. It is a cone of photons, each moving radially outward at the speed of light. The spot is where the cone intersects the cloud at a given moment. As the cone rotates, the intersection point slides across the cloud, and that slide can be superluminal, because no photon is making the trip from one side of the cloud to the other. The micro reframe is that a sweeping beam is not a moving object, but a rotating emission pattern, and the pattern's edge can travel faster than the particles that make it up. The reinforcement is that if an observer sat on the cloud and tried to send a signal to another observer farther along the cloud using the beam's arrival time, the signal would still be limited by the speed of light between the two observers, not by the speed of the spot. The fourth loop is the stadium wave. At a sports event, fans stand up and sit down in sequence, creating a traveling wave that circles the stadium. The wave can move faster than any human can run, but no person is running. Each person only moves vertically in their own seat. The speed of the wave is determined by the delay between neighbors, not by the speed of any individual. This is the same structure as the faster-than-light shadow. The old model assumes that if something appears to move from point A to point B, some carrier must travel that path. The result is that the wave moves without any carrier making the full journey. The contradiction is that speed and motion are not always the same as transport and displacement. The micro reframe is that a propagating pattern is a sequence of local events, not a traveling entity. The reinforcement is that you cannot load information onto the wave and send it faster than a person could run between the seats, because the wave's speed depends on coordination, and coordination is limited by how fast signals travel between people. The fifth loop is angular velocity scaling. The speed of a projected spot equals the angular speed of the source times the distance to the screen. If you double the distance, you double the spot's speed. If you increase the distance enough, the speed becomes infinite. This is not a breakdown of physics. It is a consequence of the fact that angular motion has no intrinsic length scale. A 1-degree rotation is the same angle whether you are 1 meter away or 1 light year away, but the arc length covered by that angle grows linearly with distance. The old model does not predict this because the old model does not usually consider projected patterns as objects with speeds. The result is that the spot's speed has no upper limit. The contradiction is that this infinite speed does not allow infinite information transfer because changing the spot's position requires changing the source, and that change propagates at the speed of light. The micro reframe is that speed without causality is not forbidden. The reinforcement is that relativity constrains causal influence, not geometric projection. The sixth loop is the information bottleneck. If you want to change the shape of a shadow on the moon, you must move the object blocking the light on Earth. That motion sends a signal to the shadow at the speed of light. The shadow itself may sweep across the lunar surface faster than light, but the onset of that sweep is delayed by the light travel time from Earth to Moon. The old model says information cannot travel faster than light. The result is that the shadow's motion does not carry information, because the shadow is not a messenger. The contradiction is that the shadow's edge can move superluminally, but the event that created the edge cannot. The micro reframe is that the shadow is an effect, not a cause. The reinforcement is that if two people stand on opposite sides of the moon and try to communicate by modulating a shadow, the communication speed will still be limited by the light travel time between Earth and Moon, not by the shadow's sweep speed. The seventh loop is the absence of momentum. A shadow carries no energy, no momentum, and no force. It cannot push an object, heat a surface, or transfer any physical quantity. In physics, this is described by saying the shadow has no pointing vector, which is the mathematical object that describes energy flow in an electromagnetic field. The old model assumes that anything moving must be carrying something. The result is that the shadow moves without carrying anything. The contradiction is that motion without transport is possible. The micro reframe is that shadows are defined by what is not there, and absences have no physical properties. The reinforcement is that you cannot harvest energy from a faster-than-light shadow, because there is no energy in the shadow to harvest. The eighth loop is phase velocity versus group velocity. In wave physics, the phase velocity is the speed at which the peaks of a wave pattern move, and the group velocity is the speed at which the energy of the wave moves. In certain materials, the phase velocity can exceed the speed of light, but the group velocity never does. This distinction is the same as the distinction between a projected pattern and a traveling particle. The old model conflates the two. The result is that physics has long recognized that not all speeds are causal speeds. The contradiction is that relativity only forbids superluminal group velocity, not superluminal phase velocity. The micro reframe is that the universe distinguishes between the speed of a pattern and the speed of its substance. The reinforcement is that every claimed faster-than-light phenomenon in headlines turns out to be a phase velocity, a projection, or a pattern, never a group velocity. The ninth loop is Cherenkov radiation. When a charged particle moves through water or glass faster than light moves through that medium, it emits a blue glow called Cherenkov radiation. This is the optical equivalent of a sonic boom. The particle is moving faster than the phase velocity of light in the material, but it is still moving slower than the speed of light in a vacuum. The old model would say, nothing can move faster than light. The result is that the particle moves faster than light in the medium, but slower than light in a vacuum. The contradiction is that the speed limit is medium-dependent for light, but absolute for information. The micro reframe is that light slows down in materials, but causality does not. The reinforcement is that Cherenkov radiation is used to detect high-energy particles in physics experiments, and the effect is perfectly consistent with relativity. Before the outro, the title question must be answered directly. What did physicists observe moving faster than light? The evidence eliminates the possibility that any particle, any energy packet, or any information carrier moved faster than light. The result is that a projected pattern, specifically a shadow or a bright spot, moved faster than light, by virtue of being a sequence of independent events rather than a traveling object. The mechanism is geometric projection, scaled to large distances. The interpretation that remains open is whether other non-causal patterns, such as quantum phase collapse or entanglement correlations, share the same structural immunity to the speed limit, but those are separate questions. What is not open is whether the faster-than-light shadow violates relativity. It does not. The old explanation assumed that all motion is transport. The measurement shows that motion can be the progression of a pattern, and relativity does not forbid that. What this changes is the viewer's category map. Speed is not always the same as travel. Motion is not always the same as a thing moving. The universe permits effects that look impossible until the definition of what moved is made precise. The emotional tale is this. The faster-than-light shadow is not a crack in physics. It is a reminder that physics describes the world with extraordinary precision, while leaving the deeper question of what motion actually is still partly unanswered. Darkness can outrun light because darkness is not a thing. That is not a failure of relativity. It is a feature of how the universe organizes cause and effect. If this kind of forensic clarity into what science actually measured is useful, consider subscribing. There is more where this came from.